Oh, are we on?
No, not yet. I haven't
Oh,
started recording. What were we gonna say?
I was going to say Yankees source had my same tweet that I had yesterday. The Yankees have turned into Fred Wilpons Mets
Yep.
26
All right,
minutes ago.
I'm recording. Good. Good. Oh, all right. I'm starting that all over again. I didn't know where my mic was. All right. Count it down again. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Today is Monday, July 26th. I'm Julian Coltree, joined alongside my compañero for this broadcast, Josh Levin. And Josh, we are angry. We are frustrated. It is just another episode of OLEP, really, right?
That's right. The more things change, nothing changes.
It's true.
That's the Yankees.
What does change is that's just you and I. Seemingly, E-Ray rotates every single week. We won't hold him against him too much. He apparently likes Boston this time more than he likes the OLEP crew, which is really saying something, though we are lucky that he was not at the game, even though he was in Boston yesterday, or else he probably would be coming home in a body bag.
Yeah. Wise choice by him to skip out on that. I know he was considering it. And hey, it looked like for the, majority of the game, he probably would have had a great time. But as we've come to learn from facing the Astros this season, it's about having the last laugh as well. So, yeah, good choice by him.
It's true. We have a lot to talk about today because this one will be our last episode before the trade deadline. So we got to highlight some of the names that the Yankees are apparently looking at. We will get to a move that they actually made legit seconds before we came on to record today's podcast. So we'll get to all the trade talk. We have some minor league talk to talk about because you have Jason Dominguez tearing up, a new Baseball America prospects list that the Yankees have a couple of guys on, and a whole bunch of other stuff regarding that. But before that, we have to get into it. The biggest series of the weekend, really of the Yankees season, was this 4-game set against Boston at Fenway Park. They had just coming off of winning the series against Boston a weekend before back at the stadium. They win both games against Philadelphia, and they have an opportunity to really put one foot in the right direction, something we've yearned for them to do this year. Without really going deep into the games just yet, Josh, it was a heartbreaker, and that's really all you can say about the series.
Yeah, just more of the same type of losses that continue to happen seemingly every week, sometimes multiple times a week. I mean, yeah, man, just brutal stuff. It's just brutal stuff. And they continue to find and invent ways to lose games that you never thought you'd see in your life. We'll get into it, but like 4 wild pitches in an inning, stuff like yesterday that we can get into the nitty gritty of. It's what you expect. And I said this yesterday, and it's the truth. Like when losses like this and things like this become unsurprising and commonplace, it's time for change. And this is nothing new. We've been saying this for months at this point, but it's the truth. When you have stuff like what happens yesterday happen to you pretty much on a weekly basis, especially in this point of the season, when every game and every series is so important. And the fact that, nothing comes of it except for more bullshit nonsense talk from the manager, it's time everyone take a look in the mirror and come to grips with what's going on here. But unfortunately, we know that won't happen.
I am a clown. I'm going to tell you why. It's not just because I root. It's not just because we root for the New York Yankees. It's because yesterday I had the nerve to say to you and E-Ray, Josh, that if they win today, and this was Sunday, then they could have won 3 out of 4 because of how heartbreaking that loss on Thursday was. But the fact was the Yankees have not deserved the benefit of the doubt that I gave them in that game. And that was really just the embodiment of the season, the embodiment of the weekend, because that was going into what ultimately was the 8th inning that did them in. And they were winning 4-0 in that game. And for all intents and purposes, they should have won, considering they had a no-hitter. But they didn't, and that is more of the same with the Yankees. It's the fact that even though I chalked that up to a win, they have found countless humiliating and humbling ways to lose this year. And it happened 2 days before that, 3 days before that, in the Thursday game where Chad Green blows it, and then they blow it in extra innings. And then it happened before the All-Star break in the game versus the Houston Astros. It happened against Minnesota when Chapman gave it up in 3 minutes. It happened. You could go down the line.
Mets.
Yep, the Angels, the Mets. You could
Twins.
go down the line. The Twins. All these games where they got screwed over. So I am an idiot who has egg on their face because I said like a weenie that, hey man, they should have won 3 out of 4. That's why they stink. No, they stink because they are just bad enough to be bad, but just good enough to not be dog shit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was sitting there thinking the same thing. I mean, I got home late yesterday from a weekend away and I put the game on in the 7th. I watched Herman strike out 4 guys in the bottom of the 7th inning. And I'm like, okay, like we got a no-hitter working here. We got a lead. This looks like pretty good right here. And then, Gary triples in the 8th. Glaber brings him around. Glaber steals a base. Now he gets, caught trying to steal. And, you could talk about that as being an issue. But the bottom line is when they're up 4-0 in the 8th inning, I'm thinking, okay, they're going to split this series. And honestly, you take it because they stole a win on Saturday. And, Friday they played poorly. So you're thinking like, okay, maybe they're not going to win the series, but at least they didn't lose ground in the division if you still have any hopes for that. But again, we get ahead of ourselves because we just think that this is not what it is. Like, this is what the bullpen is. We think it's the strength because that's what they want us to think, but it isn't. It isn't. And nothing on this team is the strength. There's, a few guys who stand out above everyone else, but the bottom line is if you were sitting there like we were yesterday thinking that this is all good and this is all great, then, you feel like an idiot. And I felt dumb yesterday. And it's the sad part is that this will probably happen again at some point.
To me, the question becomes, it's like, what are you and I missing here? What are Yankee fans missing here to the point where it's like, we see every single one of these games. We see what happens. Take these 2 losses. Thursday, they have the game where Chad Green blows it. Whether or not you wanted Cessa to come in isn't the point. But in extra innings, they stick with a guy who stinks, who's terrible, and gives them their most humiliating loss of the year to date, one of many, but another humiliating loss. Whether or not Cole wasn't able to get the job done on Friday doesn't matter. After you win on Saturday, you should go into that game on Sunday literally saying to yourself, we need this game more than life itself.
Yeah.
And yet the sense of urgency, everything they do, whether it's bringing Loizaga out when he's just off the COVID list and the guy pitched the day before, and they don't want to give guys who pitched 3 in a row or 2 in a row a third game, but apparently it's okay for a guy coming off the COVID list to pitch back-to-back days despite all Boone's rest and that sort of crap. And then you have the Britton stuff where rather than setting up the ground ball pitcher for a double play to try and get out of this inning, they pretty much put him into a situation where this guy gives up ground balls and then it just winds up shooting them in the foot because they give up the tie and then they give up the lead. So it's crazy to think, and that's why I asked, what am I missing? That it's like we are yearning for the Yankees to do this, but they're playing like they have all the time in the world. And I get it. They're 2 games out of wild card spot technically in the loss column, but good teams don't lose games like this. Good teams don't put themselves in emotional knots rather than just forego them the opportunities. They win games when they need to.
Yeah. I mean, like, you're not missing anything. It's the fan base has been, and I think we've been on this for a long time, longer than it felt like, the Yankee Twitter movement started happening sort of in in May and June. This isn't it. We're not missing anything. Their whole thing is not right. Like, we joke about me saying it's not working and all that, but it's the truth. Like, it doesn't work. Every decision that they make as an organization is the incorrect choice. And that's because they have gone about this all wrong. You said it. the sense of urgency is not there. They still prioritize rest and all that stuff over, actually putting their best foot forward and doing whatever they can to win. So they are really good. And I said before that they're not, there's no real strength. Unfortunately, what they're really good at is treading water and acting as if they have all the time in the world on their side. The issue is that they still think, and there's moves that indicate this, they still think that everything is going to turn itself around and work out okay. But we're, almost 100 games into the season. There's 60 some games left, right? Like they played 98 games. So like we have a large enough sample size of almost the entire season now to look back on and say, this idea that it's just going to flip is completely dumb. And the fact that we're sitting here 4 days away from the trade deadline, and they still have not done anything really at all to make this team better. It just shows you that the priority is keeping what they have intact because they believe at a certain point it has to flip the other way. But it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It didn't happen last year. And we all wanted to throw that away because it was a weird 60-game pandemic season, blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is all of these things that we are annoyed about now kind of showed itself last year first. It was a sign of things to come. And to sit for the organization and everybody involved to sit there and just sit on their hands and think that just because we're the Yankees and we believe in this process we have in place, that everything is going to turn around, it's completely unacceptable. But the problem is that nothing's going to happen about it until hopefully after the season, because at a certain point, we passed that certain point. Things should have changed, whether that was roster changes, coaching changes.
How many months ago were you and I, you and Ira, clamoring for them to make a trade, saying things like in maybe not April, but like the end of May? I very vividly remember coming on this podcast and one of us saying, trade for somebody, shake something up, fire coach, do something in order to get some sort of, jolt into this clubhouse. And now, like you said, it's 3 days before the trade, 4 days before the trade deadline, depending on when you're listening to this. And they still haven't done really anything to show that it's like, hey, we're not just trying to put Band-Aid on a bullet wound, but we're trying to correct this issue.
I mean, I don't even know. My frustration level has reached a point that I never knew existed.
Yeah.
Just because it's so painfully obvious to everybody who watches except them. And I just don't understand it. I mean, they have a general manager who is a legend. He's a legend. And at a certain point, the bloom just falls off the rose. And I think we're there. We've been there probably for a couple of years. We probably didn't even want to really admit it or realize it, but we're there.
Yep.
And you mix that fact of him kind of just missing on a lot of moves of late.
Pretty much his entire offseason was.
But go back further because, they treated the manager job like it was an entry-level position. Like it didn't matter who they hired because of the players they had and the front office philosophy. It was all going to work no matter what. So they treated it like it was an entry-level job. They gave it to somebody who had no experience coaching, managing, front office experience of any kind. All he was a broadcaster and a seemingly nice guy with a good personality and a good temperament. And, that was the beginning of the end. That offseason, which we thought was the beginning of something special, was the beginning of the end, because we're not going to get into Stanton, but that trade was not a good trade and it has hamstrung them in multiple ways. But the major problem is Boone. So they have a front office staff and a front office philosophy that is not right now. And they mix it with a guy who just doesn't really have a clue. And what do you get when you do that? We talked about it a few weeks ago. I said, you have the ingredients, but the chef messes it up and you get a bad dinner. And that's what we have. That's what we have.
I agree. I'm glad you brought up a few minutes ago, Josh, the fact that a lot of people want to discount last season, the 60-game season. And we all talked about it, Glaber coming in overweight and maybe not having a lot of people because of injuries and stuff. And not getting a full season of Stanton. But the fact is, this weekend, the Yankees have played, 98 games, you said?
Yeah.
So they're coming up on their 100-game mark for this year. They played 60 games last year. So you are one series, this upcoming Rays series, away from the 162-game mark from last year and this year combined. I did the stats this morning. I calculated everything, so I know what it is. Yankees have played 158 games with this core. That's 3 less games than a full 162. Right now, their record is 84-74. So best case scenario, which neither of you think is going to happen, but neither of us think is going to happen. Not neither of you. Erase not here.
He thinks it too, though.
Yes, it's true. The best case scenario is that the Yankees sweep Tampa and go 87-74 over this 162-game stretch. So the best it could be is 87-74, which is exactly what you and I could see them doing this year. This 162 games from the start of 2021 to the end of October of 2021, an 87-win team is what we think right now on July 26th, the New York Yankees more or less could be. Maybe it's 85, maybe it's 84, maybe it's 86, maybe it's 87, but somewhere in that range is what we think. And for a team that was expected to win 100 games, for a team that was expected to not just win the division, but handily win it over Boston and Tampa Bay, 2 teams that subtracted this offseason, and one of which was one of the worst teams in the league last year, and be a World Series team, to say now that they're an 87-win team blows your mind maybe back in April. But now you got to factor in things like how bad they were last year and how over a last 162 games, they've been a little bit above mediocre.
It tracks. I said that to you earlier, like 84 win pace tracks with what this team is. And, last year there was a lot of different excuses and reasons for things. There was injuries again and, whatever. But this year, like up until this COVID thing and like the injuries have happened of late, but they weren't to guys who, for the most part, were expected to make major contributions. Like, yes, we expected Clint Frazier to be the everyday left fielder and have a really good season. I think I even said before the season started, I thought he'd make the All-Star team. But, Miguel Andujar, we expected nothing from him. And, there have been injuries, especially lately, but you can't blame what's been going on that. They don't have the excuses that they've had in the past, like they could blame like the 2018 stuff. There was injuries then, there was injuries in 2019, but they were able to rise above it because they got unbelievable contributions from guys that you just didn't, expect it from. And last year when those guys had to play again, they showed that they didn't belong. And again, this year they didn't belong. So the excuses that they've had in the past, they're gone now. And, we said it before the season started. We all thought they would win the American League. We thought they'd go to the World Series, probably win the World Series. And we weren't alone. A lot of people had the same thoughts too.
Of course.
But we said at the time that, like short of winning a championship, it's an absolute, failure because of how good they were supposed to be. And now we're sitting here talking and like, I don't think they're making the playoffs. I haven't thought that in a while. I'm not saying that I've given up, because when you have a second wild card spot and you're only 3 whatever games out, your season's very much not over. But I have no faith personally in this, roster or the manager or the GM to cobble stuff together enough to make a run that you can actually say to yourself, be somewhat satisfied with it. No matter how this season ends, short of a championship, which is not happening, it's a failure. It's a complete failure. It's a disaster beyond anything we could have thought of, because at no point did it cross our minds that it could be as bad as it's been.
Mm-hmm.
And
I agree.
That's the reality of the situation, is that short of winning a championship, it's a complete failure. And maybe if they had gotten to the World Series this year and not won it, we may not have felt that way. Maybe we would have thought, this was a great season. This was a great team. Let's bring them back next year. Let's bring Boone back next year. But with the way things have gone, if they do miraculously turn it around and play 600 baseball the rest of the way to get to 90 wins and they secure a playoff spot, I'm sorry, that's not successful. They can't sit there and tell me after that happens that, well, look at what happened the last 2 months of the season. Look how great we played. Look how fast and quickly we turned it around. Like, sorry, but this is over for me. Like, this group it needs to break up. The manager needs to go. The GM needs to go. It's too bad the owner can't go. Yeah.
They're not the Nationals from,
No.
What was that, 3 years ago, where they had a core kind of in place. They had some good players, Max Scherzer, obviously, the name that comes to mind, Strasburg and Trey Turner, Juan Soto, guys who are good. But, they were kind of like the third, fourth tier team people thought of when it came to people who would potentially win a World Series. And at the midway point, they were like, all right, they're nothing. And then they went on a run. The Yankees are not going to be that. And the fact that the Yankees are even in that discussion of just being able to go out there to have to put them in a position to win a road 50-50 winner take all game is an abomination. And that's why we're suckers at the end of the day, because you and me and E-Ray, we're going to be there. We're going to be watching. I saw somebody tweet yesterday, this will probably be the last Yankee game I really pay attention to. And I thought, wow, that must be nice, because the fact is I got nothing to do on most weeknights. So I'm going to sit there and watch this stupid team play. And probably 2 times out of maybe the 5 to 6 games that they play a week, 7 games on some weeks, see them do what they did twice in Boston.
Yeah.
Because that's the MO and the makeup of this team.
Yeah.
It is shitty managing. It's terrible construction. And none of the things that they are supposedly supposed to get better at have they gotten better at. Even if they won that game yesterday, Josh, it was riddled with bad base running, bad situational hitting, and outside of Herman, bad decision making with the bullpen and bad decision making with, the way that they were managing everything from that perspective. So it's like you expect at this point to just watch a terrible team. And it would be so much easier if they were like 15 games under 500, because then you wouldn't have to give a crap.
Yeah.
I just look at that quote that Aaron Boone said yesterday, which is, we're going to do what we did all year.
I was going to bring that up.
Yep. But to me, it's a funny quote because he's kind of right, but he's not right in the way that he thinks he is. When he said, we're going to do what we've done all year, which is get up, he's right. The Yankees have gotten up every single time to get promptly hit in the head with a chair every single time again and fall back down.
Yeah.
And they might not give a crap, but the fan base sure does, because we have to watch this.
Yeah. And I think so. Like, I was going to bring that up. That was my next point. And at some point, I do want to get into like what exactly happened in that 8th inning yesterday, and also talk about the extra inning, the 10th inning on Thursday. But when, he goes up there after the game, I tweeted out in the middle of the 8th inning, like while the meltdown was happening, what he was going to say. And it was another gut punch, but I know the guys in that room, we're going to get back up and, handle it like we always do. And like, they keep getting up, and then it pretty much he said the exact same thing. Like, we're going to handle it the way we have all year. We're going to get back up and get through the adversity. If dealing with adversity and, getting back up from tough losses results in, a 51 wins, basically at the 100 win point, you're whatever it is, 8-9 games out of the division, 3 games out of a second wild card spot. That's not handling adversity successful, and
especially with the team.
It's not even close to it. He's a fucking clown, and that's the bottom line. Is it's one of two things: either he's just a liar to the media and just says shit, or
which I do think he is,
or he's so lost in his own bullshit. Either way, it's bad. And like, it's just, and personally, like, you think sometimes that maybe the coach or the manager will say stuff to the media to paint a good light of the players, but in the locker room and in the clubhouse behind closed doors, really get into them and let them know like what's going on needs to change and it's not acceptable. But this guy, there's no way he's doing that. Whatever he's telling the media is exactly pretty much the same thing he's saying to the players. And you could tell because nothing ever changes. Like, I
mean, we saw it happen earlier the year where he apparently reamed him out and then they lost the next day.
Yeah. And like yesterday, Kike Hernandez, who had a huge hit in that rally, says after the game, like, at some point in the 8th inning, Alex Cora said, like, if we get another hit here, we're going to win the game. And like you have the two just complete opposites of the spectrum when it comes to the managers. And this is a point that we've beaten over the head a million times, but it comes out, of course, when the Yankees play these teams because these teams are better than them and they have better managers and they're better coached and they're run better. And that's why they
10 minutes ago, they devalued the manager position
yeah.
when they hired Aaron Boone.
And it's proven to be wrong. They've proven to be wrong on this prioritizing rest over wins. They're wrong on the manager. They're wrong on so many of the roster decisions. Tyler Wade is still on this team somehow.
He's a 36 OPS plus.
And you know what? They were right. Rougned Odor. They were right about that. But you know what? That doesn't matter, because when you're right about that one thing, that doesn't make up for the 10 other mistakes. We don't even talk about the offseason and how much of a failure that was. And it's just, I'm getting too off track, but Boone, he's just a clown. And he's a complete puppet of the front office, because this is exactly what they wanted. They wanted somebody who wasn't going to be tough on the players, who was going to paint a positive picture to the media and to the players behind closed doors. They've gotten exactly that. So I hope they're happy with what has unfolded here, because it's 100% on them.
Let's go into the two Boone, moments from this
Boone
weekend,
ball,
because
I
think, yes, the Boone ball, because I think that perfectly captures everything we're saying about their inability to overcome their own errors, even though it happens every single time. It starts with the game on Thursday. It ends with the game on Sunday. You bookend it with two terrible managerial decisions. I know you want to be the guy to lead the charge with it, so get down to it.
Well, basically on first, let me say this before we start. We know that the bullpen has been incredibly thin because of COVID and all that, and just the fact that they have to be used so often, and Chapman, pitching poorly of late. But there's still, things that you can't do. So they get into a situation because of the fact that they didn't have Loaizaga, and Green blows the game there in regular. I forget, was it the 8th inning? He blew the game on Thursday. So they get in
ninth inning.
Ninth inning, because they brought Sessa in. So, like, in my opinion, I had no issue with them going to Green, even though Sessa threw 5 pitches. Now, you can say, with this is a second guess, but you can say that, well, with the way the bullpen is right now, maybe, you have a guy who's thrown 5 pitches in an inning. Maybe you let him go out there and start the 9th, and you have Green warming up in case of an emergency. I personally didn't think that in the moment. So, like, I'm not going to say that's my criticism, but it just, it doesn't work out. So it is what it is. And then you don't really have anybody left to come into the game besides, the Brooks Kriskys and Justin Wilsons of the world in the 10th. We saw Brooks Kriske pitch I think it was the 10th inning on Wednesday, the day before, against the Phillies, and it worked out for them. So they went to that well again. But he's all over the place, throws 4 wild pitches, gives up the game, doesn't even give up a hit to do that, just because the wild pitches keep letting these, and he walks people. These pass balls and wild pitches keep letting guys, advance and score. So there's a 3-batter minimum in baseball, right? So he's got to face 3 guys. They have Justin Wilson warming up. What I don't understand is, at a certain point, you have to be able, and this is something that we've said so many times, he doesn't have feel for the game. And at a certain point, you have to just know, my guy doesn't have it right now. And that's the moment when you make the move. Now, we're not saying that Justin Wilson is going to save you and keep the, keep the game in position to come back and win it, or to keep the lead that they had. But the point is, when you've got a guy who's, he's 27 years old, he's not a prospect. So this isn't a guy that you really believe has any bright future with your organization. He's just a guy. He's just a body. He's somebody that's up and down from Scranton to New York when they need an arm. You have to make the move to Wilson. You can load the bases to set up the double play. This is another thing that they don't do for some reason. They did it earlier in the season. They don't treat the extra inning like they should. They started to on offense with the bunts and but on when they're pitching, they don't walk the guy to set up the double play. All these things that you have in your back pocket, that these tools that you have in your back pocket to get through a tough situation, they're in a spot where their one pitch will lose them the game. But if you set up the double play, one pitch could also get you out of the game. But if you don't set up the double play, you're, just grasping at straws and hoping that Kriske will somehow put it together. So the issue is that you have to make the move to the bullpen. If you have the guy warming up, Like, you have him warming up. Why is he not coming in the game? There was nothing Krisky was doing that suggested that he was going to work his way out of the situation and suddenly figure it out and get himself in control. He was too big for the moment, and that's not his fault, but that's the truth. And so, Boone after the game says that he didn't really want to go to Wilson. It was an emergency situation that he would have gone to him. What bigger emergency is there than that?
And losing the game.
Yeah, losing the game that you have.
Once the game's over, it's done.
You had it won twice. You had it won in the 9th, and you had it won in the 10th when you took the lead again. So what is there? I just don't understand. Like, and why do they care about loading the bases? They're winning by 1. So, like, it's not as if that, if they're worried about Boston scoring 4 runs and then they have to come back. If they score,
that's it. The game's over.
The game's over. So why do they care about the extra guy on the base? It doesn't matter. All it does is set up a potential double play to get you out of it, right? And to keep you in the game with the lead or with the game tie. Mm-hmm. So it's just it's inexcusable. It's just like, that's where you can see that he's in over his head and he's not good at his job. He's just not. And if you're following along during the game while you're watching and you're saying to yourself, okay, well, I would do that, or maybe maybe they should do this. You are at least in the zone. You have a clue. He doesn't have a clue. They act like, I feel like they don't even pay attention.
You cannot tell me that the thing he did with Lance Lynn back in 2018, his first season, warming this guy up, a starter mid-inning and bringing him in with the bases loaded, is not something that you, me, E-Ray, every person on Yankees Twitter would not be surprised if he did this year. And it's because he has not learned in the 3 years either. It's bad enough that he was an inexperienced manager, but now literally 3.5 years into the job, and that's what it is. It's 3.5 years into the job because he had all of 2018, all of 2019, the 60 games of 2020, and now all of 2021. He makes the same mistakes that a rookie manager would do. And if it's Brian Cashman, who is really the manager and not Aaron Boone, and they're just using the analytics, then that's even more of a reason for him to have to go by the wayside too. And that's why it's so infuriating to see them lose these games each way, because it is the quintessential idea of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result.
Yeah.
And look, here's the thing. I would like them to do the same thing over and over again and not give up a bunch of prospects to help a team that sucks. But I would at least want them to learn from their mistakes. When we're in grade school and we have to do our math homework or do our writing homework to get better, to learn more, to become smarter, we have to learn from our mistakes, see why what happened and why it was an issue, and go from there. And that does not happen on this team.
Yep.
Every single issue that they have, whether it's letting a guy like Chad Green, who clearly doesn't have it, continue to be out there, or a guy like Loizaga, who really clearly doesn't have it, continue to be out there, or walking guys in extra innings to set up a double play so that way you have a chance to get out of the game, or, not letting a guy reach who might turn out to be a bigger run later on. They don't stop themselves from doing it. I mean, the Loizaga situation that happened on Sunday's game was the exact same one from the game against Houston.
Mm-hmm.
A guy they brought in who had nothing. He had nothing from the moment he got onto the mound, and they didn't do anything. They didn't warm anybody up until Zach Britton later on in the inning. And then finally, once he got pounded, they were like, all right, I guess we'll go to the bullpen now. It happened 3 weeks before, and they couldn't learn from it. And that, to me, is inexcusable.
Yeah. And also, separate point, but Chapman pitched Tuesday and Wednesday against Philly. I know they don't like to go to a guy 3 days in a row, but at a certain point, you have to start prioritizing these games over the rest. And that's what I was getting at before when I said that.
Yeah.
They are still not showing the sense of urgency. They're still saying it's more important for us to give Chapman this day off than it is to bring him in and give ourselves a better chance to win this game. That is a situation in which you bring the guy in, you use your closer. Because if you use your closer in the 9th inning, and he blows it in the 9th, you still have Green for the 10th.
Yep.
So, that's a moment where, as the manager, you have to say to yourself, I know this is something that we don't like doing, but I have to do it. We've seen them do it in past seasons where in a big spot, in a big game, they'll go to a guy for the third day in a row. We've been saying this for the last few weeks. Every game, the game that they're playing that day is the biggest game of the season.
Yeah.
And that's the situation they put themselves in. So you can't, I just don't understand why that's not even a consideration. You can't, and you will never be able to convince me that it's the right choice, because at no point over these years has this worked. They have, it's like the Clippers in basketball. Like the resting the players, it does not necessarily lead to wins and championships. Yep. And that's where I feel like we're at now with this team. And it comes back into play in yesterday's game too.
I agree 100%. Some final notes that I had just gotten from a good Tom Verducci article that he did a little earlier today. Right now, the Yankees record currently in 2021, 51-47. They were 50-48, Josh, back in 2016 when they sold off Aroldis Chapman to the Cubs and he won a World Series. And then, of course, Andrew Miller. So that will get into what we're going to talk about in just a few seconds with the trade deadline and what to expect there. But just some other stats that he pointed out that were very interesting. The Yankees have 51 or fewer wins in their first 90 games for the 35th time in their franchise's history. Only one of those previous 34 Yankees teams made the postseason. That was the team that in 1995 was the wild card winners. That was when there was only one wild card. So I guess even more impressive if you think about it. But the Yankees probably are not going to be able to do that as well. The Yankees 3 through 6 hitters. They have a franchise's 5th worst OPS since the live ball era began back in 1920. The 5th worst. Think of how many teams have played for the Yankees from 1920 to 1921, the last 101 years. This is the 5th worst OPS from 3 through 6 hitters. The first baseman, which we know have been a black hole this year, they have the 2nd worst OPS in franchise history. 1982 was the production's worst first base. 1982 was the worst production they've ever gotten at first base. After 4 seasons in which they were 1st or 2nd in the AL in runs per game, they're tied for 12th. Only the Mariners and Rangers have more trouble scoring runs. They are 8-17 against Boston and Tampa. They're hitting .206 as a team in those games. Giancarlo Stanton, who, you know what, I've loved in my Yankees career, or in his career, but at this point he has become a big part of the problem regarding this core and why they are not winning right now. His DH only personality at this point, and we were supposed to see him this weekend play in the outfield, but he never did. His DH only limits what the Yankees can do. And in his 4 seasons with New York, his sprint speed has declined every single year. So he is getting worse when it comes to running at this point, and that only hurts his ability to play the outfield. And then last but not least, the Yankees built their offense on home runs, which was a great idea in 2019 with the rabbit ball, but troublesome in 2021 with more drag on the ball. The Yankees have a home run rate that is down 16% this year. That is terrible for a team that has to hit home runs. So those are just some, I guess, grab bag of stats to tell you how bad this Yankees team has been. But the question still becomes, Josh, what are they going to do? Because they are now 4 days, more or less, away from the trade deadline, and there have been a multitude of names that have been linked to them, a multitude of people who they could potentially get to shore out the roster. And we have to talk about all of them because this will be the last show that we probably do before they ultimately decide to make a deal next week. They did make a deal already, so we'll start with that. We'll dive right into it. We all wanted Hoy Park to be a member of the team, but it turns out he is not going to, because he's going to Pittsburgh for their new reliever.
Yeah, Hoy Park, along with infielder Diego Castillo, were sent to Pittsburgh for right-handed reliever Clay Holmes. This is a man with a 4.93 ERA this season. He's arbitration eligible for the first time after the season ends. The numbers aren't great. He's a ground ball.
Not the sugarcoat.
Yeah, they're bad. He's a ground ball pitcher. I think you said, what was it? 70.
He has the highest ground ball percentage in baseball.
And he also, limits hard contact. So the Yankees like that stuff. So they must think that there's something there that they can, uncover to help right this ship. I have no confidence that is going to be the case based on a lot of the things that we've seen and said. I think, they never really, it never seemed like they really wanted Hoy Park. He was, playing great in AAA. And the only thing it took for him to get on the roster in the majors was a COVID outbreak. And even then, when he came up, he had one at bat, in which he saw one pitch in a pinch hitting appearance and grounded out. So they treated him while he was up in the majors like they didn't even want him there. And I just don't know what to say. I mean, I've never heard of this pitcher until, an hour ago. I'm sure we'll see how it goes. He walks a lot of guys, so that's not great. We'll probably see him come in a big moment, bigger than it should be, and walk a couple guys and, get them into a hairy situation. I don't understand the Park thing. Like, this is his career year in AAA, and this is his highest value, is a guy, who's about to hit arbitration with a lifetime 5 ERA. I don't know. In the past, I would say Ninja Cashman probably sees something, but we're beyond that now. So
yeah, and here's the thing: you and I both talked about it briefly before we even started to record here. It's almost an indictment on, or even more of an indictment on, the front office, because this is a guy who, let's make no mistake about it, was absolutely tearing the cover off the ball in AAA. He was batting over 300. He was super good defensively. They tried him out at a multitude of positions. He was somebody who we were really, hoping to see come up at some point on this team. But it seemed like at every single junction, you had Cashman say, oh, he's not ready. Oh, we don't think he's a major leaguer. Oh, this, that, and the other thing. So what does that say about the front office and Cashman, other than they're idiots because this guy is hitting that good in AAA, or this guy is hitting so good in AAA but isn't a major leaguer and is one of your big studs this year? So no matter which way you turn it, whether he stinks or he's good, it's egg on the face of the front office. It's egg on the face of Cashman, who doesn't need anything else right now, at least in my mind, and your mind's probably too, to say this guy looks like he is 1 foot out the door already.
Yeah, I mean, these are moves that surprise you, because Park is a guy, listen, he's a little bit older, so he's not necessarily a prospect at this stage in his career, but he's somebody that you would think would have a role on this team, especially with a team that employs Tyler Wade in the same role that Park could have been in, which is a utility player all over the infield. Park can play the outfield too. So like, it just makes you wonder why is he not, worthy of a chance over Wade, who we see, with a 30 whatever OPS plus. Like, this guy can't be that much worse. And if he is, again, it's an indictment on you as a general manager. I don't know. I'm not going to say that it's a desperation move, because listen, like, I don't think anybody is sitting here saying that the Yankees are trading for this guy thinking that he's going to suddenly change the bullpen and everything's going to get right back in order the way it was supposed to be all along. So I'm not going to say that this is a move that Cashman is making with an eye on saving his job, but it's definitely not a move that I saw coming or would have expected. It's being panned on Twitter, which is what you'd expect at this point from this front office. And it just feels like every decision is the wrong decision, which kind of feels like the Yankees are now the Wilpon Mets, which is horrible to say. I mean, we'll have to see. Like, we're not going to be able to jump to a conclusion and make an assessment when the guy hasn't even gotten to the city yet. But we got to see how this plays out. I don't think anybody really has high expectations. We probably all think Park will go to Pittsburgh. He'll probably play second base now that they traded Adam Frazier.
Yeah.
And, we'll see what happens. We'll see if he plays well. If he plays well, it's an indictment on the Yankees once again for making the wrong decision and not evaluating the talent they have properly, because I still can't get past the fact that this guy, with the season he was having at AAA, couldn't have gotten at least a chance to take Tyler Wade's job in the major leagues.
You know what it reminds me of? And you're going to hate me for bringing it up, but it reminds me of Rob Refsnyder and Stephen Drew.
Oh,
that's
That's
what it reminds me of.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Think of how much you and I summers ago wanted Refsnyder to get a shot, and they were too hung up on this guy who they gave a contract to. And at the time, that was Joe Girardi. It wasn't Aaron Boone, but it was still Brian Cashman. And he was so so gung-ho on this idea of, this is a guy who I went out there and got. I think he traded with Boston for him.
Yeah.
So, they gave him every single shot, and it blew up in their face, and he stunk. And Ref Snyder never really panned out. I think he was having a good year this year before he got hurt with Minnesota. But it's like to think how somebody's confidence could be different or how they could be perceived if rather than just saying this guy isn't a major leaguer, you let them perform to what their numbers say in AAA. I mean, maybe it's a concept I just don't get because I am not one of these quote unquote nerds who run in the front office. But for me, that's what this situation really reminds me of. And Tyler Wade is just one on the long list of issues that are plaguing this 2021 Yankees team. But it's a pretty glaring one when you consider, like I said, the guy has a 36 OPS plus. League average is 100. He has a 36, and he still gets to play every single day. And he made a huge error this weekend that cost him an out in a game.
Yeah.
When he was trying to turn that double play and he wasn't able to do it. So it isn't as if this utility guy is the real Ben Zobrist. He's bad Ben Zobrist, which is why I nicknamed him BBZ. But it does not bode well trade-wise for what they might do in the next couple of days, which is a good transition point because we got some names to talk about. Last week, you and I went in a little bit with E-Ray about Joey Gallo. The big story this week is a name that I can speak for myself. I think you feel the same way with me here, that I want zero part of. I pray the New York Yankees do not make a deal for Trevor Story, but that was the hot rumor this week.
Yeah, I mean, he's a really good player, and in a vacuum, like this is a guy that you would want to have on your team. But again, the Yankees can't continue making decisions in that vacuum because he's another right-handed hitter. He's a high strikeout guy as well. He doesn't really have a position to play on this team unless they are going to shift Glaber back to second and move DJ to first. There was talk about him possibly playing center field if they traded for him, which would be a very interesting sight to watch this guy, an all-star shortstop, learn a new position in the middle of a playoff hunt. But yeah, the reason why I don't want him is because I don't want any rental. So like if you're telling me in the offseason and there's some changes made and the Yankees are in on Story to offer him a contract, we can have that discussion. But as far as it goes with 2021, I am against any rental. Story would not sign an extension this close to free agency. So it's not a situation in which the Yankees will trade for him and then sign him to a long-term deal. It would be a rental and a hope that they could re-sign him come November or December. So yeah, no, I'm out. I'm out on any rental, any player that you're going to name that's on an expiring contract. I'm 100% out on. This team is not close enough to doing anything that would require, a rental piece being added to it. They don't deserve that trade to be made. And most importantly, I do not want Brian Cashman trading the prospects for guys who may not be here next year, who may only help us, come in third place in the wild card and miss the playoffs completely. I don't want Brian Cashman making desperation moves to save his job. I don't want him trading prospects to keep himself and Aaron Boone in their positions. So yeah, I'm saying it as strongly as I possibly can. I don't want any rental.
Yeah, and for me, Trevor's Story is just the complete opposite of what the New York Yankees need. If they want to do something to save their 2021, going after, like you said, a high strikeout right-handed hitter who plays in Colorado, so we don't know how that's going to transfer. Yeah, it worked with DJ, but it might not work with a different guy because we've seen some back and forth in relation to guys coming over from Denver to new places. It's to me, it's like everything that has been wrong about this team. And I've been obviously vocal on this podcast that if the Yankees do go after a shortstop this offseason, I want it to be Seager because he's a lefty, because he's done it before. He's a guy that I think would really fit with the Yankees prototype. But it's like the one guy I don't want is the guy who is going to wind up being just another version of everybody you have in the lineup already. And even if next year they sign Trevor Story, unless they're making big changes, are you really going to shell out a big contract to just another version of Stanton, another version of Judge, another version of Gary, but at shortstop? And to me, that's a hard no. I don't want that, especially not on July 26th, where they need to improve this roster. And getting a guy like Trevor Story is not that. I see a lot of people on Yankees Twitter, a lot of these, head in their hand Yankee fans who are hyped over the idea of Trevor Story. And to those Yankee fans, I say, get a grip. Because just being hyped about the Yankees being attached to big names does not mean that being attached to those big names are good. Learn from the Giancarlo Stanton trade. I was huge into Stanton coming here. You were huge into Stanton coming here. 3, 4, 5 years removed from that, we were both like, all right, we probably would have gone back and pray that they didn't do it. That's what this seems like to me. The only difference is it's not happening in the offseason. So I, for one, don't go with that. Don't be able to do it. The follow-up a little bit on what we discussed last week, I actually am starting to come around big time on the idea of Joey Gallo. I think for me, we've talked about defensively, he would be a good guy to have in the outfield, especially since it does not look like at any point they're going to be putting Giancarlo Stanton out there. Boone said, even though he's a liar, and we all know he's a liar, he said that they were going to play him in Boston. They didn't. So to have a good quality outfielder like Gallo would be good. And I read a stat today, and I shared it with you, that actually I think would be perfect for the Yankees in regards to Gallo. And that was that Joey Gallo has only grounded into 9 double plays his entire career. The league leader in double plays this year has grounded into 16. Obviously, the Yankees have grounded into a crap ton themselves. An average player in Joey Gallo's at-bats would have grounded into 48 double plays at a minimum in his career. So he has grounded into 9, which is a lot less than the league average. Yankees could use some fly ball hitters, contact hitters. The fact is, whether or not you want to complain about the strikeouts, and obviously the Yankees do have issues with that, if you factor in the fact that this guy is not going to hit into double plays and he gets on base and he plays good defense and he has the control ability, I think that is a smart investment for this team. Granted, I think it does kind of hold up with the idea that you said about not wanting to trade prospects to save your job. And if that's the only reason why Cashman and Boone are trying to do this is to save their job, then I probably would be against it. But I do think Gallo, for me, day by day, is looking more and more like a quality investment.
Yeah, I think, and this is my philosophy in general, this trade deadline is I'm interested in players that can help them beyond 2021. I've made it clear, like, not one guy is fixing this year, but they can get a head start on their offseason shopping this deadline with moves like a Gallo. They can add him and he will, improve them this year, maybe help them make a wild card game, but he'll be a big part of next year's team as well, because he's still under control in 2022. So it's moves like that I, think would best suit them, because we know what the weaknesses are. So now it's time to go ahead and start fixing them. And if they can get started on that in July of 2021 instead of December, January, I think that's in the best interest of the team, regardless of anything with the manager or the GM returning next season.
Yep, I agree. Just some names I'll throw out there for you. Tell me if they interest you at all and at any point. Max Kepler was the one I heard, Whit Merrifield, and then obviously Starling Marte, who we have talked about before on this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I like those players. Starling Marte is another guy, though, who's a rental. So if they're trading for him, I would hope that it would come with an extension. But I have, I have said this before, I want lefty bats. So, Kepler's a lefty. So he would be somebody that would, make some sense. I don't know if he's the right type of hitter. He's not an average hitter at all. So not a contact guy. So I'm not sure if he's the right fit. But again, beggars can't be choosers. They're going to have to make moves to improve them beyond 2021. Sorry. So yeah, I mean, like Whit Merrifield, another great player who plays infield and outfield. He's a contact hitter. But I'm just not sure, another right-hander. I'm just not sure about that. I mean, of the names that you mentioned, Marte surprisingly interests me the most, but that would have to come with some sort of understanding that this guy's going to re-sign.
Last but not least, you were the guy who called it in our preseason predictions, Max Scherzer to the Yankees. There are rumors he might come to New York. It's just not with the Yankees. But if the opportunity arose and the Yankees were able to get Scherzer, would you be on board with giving up anything for it or no at this point?
No, because again, another rental. He's a Scott Boras guy, so he's not signing an
Oh,
extension.
yeah, definitely.
He's going to free agency. Again, would it be in a vacuum? Yes, because that's your number 2 starter behind Cole. So Cole pitches in the wild card game. You have Scherzer start game 1 of the DS, right? In your dreams. But again, even adding the guy like that isn't fixing anything. So like I'm out on rentals. It has to be players who are controllable beyond this year that can help them be better next year.
And look, it makes sense for the Mets. That's what the rumor is, because the fact is they have Jake DeGrom. He's their best pitcher. They're leading the division, and to slot in a guy like Scherzer too behind DeGrom and in front of Marcus Stroman, that's as good as it gets. That's all you could hope for a rotation for a 3-game series. But the fact is the Yankees are not at that point, as you laid it out already, Josh. So we'll have to see there. That's kind of where their trade deadline things have been. But I think you, me, E-Ray, we all kind of stand the same, idea when it comes to don't sell unless you need to sell, or sell if you can sell. Don't buy unless you need to buy. And if you are buying, buy for 2022 in mind, rather than just buy for the sake of being able to save your job.
Yeah.
As far as some of the other things, just to kind of touch on briefly, the Yankees do have 3 prospects in Baseball America's Top 100 that came out today. Obviously, the guy who led the pack there is Jason Dominguez, who has been absolutely tearing the cover off the ball for Tampa. Our little papa down in Tampa, Jason Dominguez, 9 hits in his first couple of games there, Josh. He's gotten a hit, and I'm pretty sure every single game, right? Which is impressive, to say the least.
I was going to say it's nice to have that, at least a guy that we have high hopes for. To watch him excel in the beginning of his career is fun.
Yep. And then just to kind of put a little bit of a bow on everything, pitching wise, Corey Kluber, he threw a 25-pitch bullpen session on Friday. So him and Luis Severino would be our deadline acquisitions as far as pitchers are concerned. And you might even have to throw Clark Schmidt in there too, because he's rehabbing again. Obviously, he had all the upper body, arm, shoulder problems earlier in the year, which shut him down for forever. But now he's rehabbing again. He threw 3 scoreless innings in his first appearance on the mound. So we'll have to see whether or not that turns into anything. But he might be a trade deadline pitching acquisition as well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. That's another thing, that whole injury. I mean, it was supposed to be like he was supposed to be shut down for like 3 weeks. And it's basically August, and he's just now starting to pitch in games. So another mess. But hopefully for him, he can stay on the right track, stay healthy, and maybe in September get a chance to come up again.
Yep, I agree. All right, Papa of the week.
I guess Rougned Odor. I mean, he's been the best player on the team the second half of the season so far, with Judge out on the COVID IL. He's completely turned around everybody's thoughts. The entire fan base's thoughts on him have changed with the way he's played and the energy that he brings to the field and to the dugout. So yeah, I mean, if he keeps doing what he's doing, that's great. So good week for him. He was good yesterday. So I guess I don't really know what other choice there is.
Yeah. The only other person who I will give a small shout out to is Jamison Tyone.
Yeah.
We've been really hard on him, but he pitched really good in the Boston series, and he's actually gotten 7 innings the last couple of handful of starts that he's pitched. So look, here's the thing. If the Yankees are going to turn it around, it's not just going to be Garrett Cole. It's going to have to be guys like Armand pitch as good as he did in that game they ultimately lost, or Tyone pitching that good, or Jordan Montgomery pitching as well as he pitched before the rain delay in Boston on Thursday. So we'll have to see how it goes. But other than that, any final thoughts, bud?
Final thoughts. Hopefully Judge gets back in the next couple days. He traveled with the team to Tampa. Kyle Higashioka seems to be on his way because Rob Brantley was sent back to Scranton to make room for Holmes just a little bit ago. So Higgy will probably be activated tomorrow.
What does your gut say? Trade deadline. What are they doing?
My gut is they're making small moves. I don't think I would be happy with Gallo. I don't think they're going to make any moves like that. I think it's going to be small things. I don't even know. I honestly don't know if I can name a specific player or target, but I think it's going to be incremental things that really don't change much. But they could at least say like, hey, we added.
Yeah.
But like most things, it will probably fall short. And the only other thing I want to say is just don't screw it up. That's all I ask. Whatever moves they make, whether they're big or small, just don't do anything stupid. Don't
Well, they already did that today before we went on the podcast.
Don't mortgage the future. That's all I'll say. Don't mortgage the future, because these prospects are probably going to be important, whether that's if they're on the team in the future or being traded for other guys, whether that's by this same general manager or by the next one, if there is a next one.
Absolutely. Well, the Yankees are going to be in action now, 3 games against Tampa Bay. As I said, that's going to put the kibosh on the 162 of the 60-game season last year and the 100 plus games or so that they played this year. So we'll see what exactly they're at after this 3-game set. First game's tomorrow, Tuesday, July 27th. That's a 7:00 start. Then a Wednesday 7:00 start before they have the dreaded Thursday day game at 1:00 against Tampa Bay. So we'll see how that goes. That's going to do it for us here inside Our Little Yankees podcast. As always, you can listen to new episodes of our pod wherever you hear podcasts. That includes Spotify podcasts, Apple podcasts. We're on TuneIn. We're on SoundCloud. We also do every episode live on YouTube. Our channel is Our Little Yankees podcast, and you can follow us on Twitter at Our Lil Yanks Pod, OurLilYankspod. For Josh Levin, I'm Julian Coltree. No E-Ray today. We'll get him next week when he comes back from Boston. We'll see what the Yankees do at the trade deadline, but until then, we'll see what they have to do against Tampa and where they'll find themselves as this 3-game set. We'll catch you later, folks. Go Yankees.